shit! I will kick your ass.
Well, fans can be the harshest critics, you know.
And they often are.
A wife is often the harshest critic of her husband.
I thought I was invincible. That's what you're trained to believe as a sports person.
There was 4 million people in Ireland who knew much more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof with the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jim McGuinness in his life.
This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us on 53106. We're streaming the conversation as well now. You can listen on News Talk, watch us on the Off the Ball social and digital channels, for Periscope on Twitter, at Off the Ball YouTube, and on Facebook, and also on the OTB Sports app. This is the Saturday panel. We're going to review the sporting week now, between now and 2:35, with the broadcaster and accredited sports psychologist Máire-Treasa Nic-Cheallaigh, Irish independent sports writer Michael Verney, and the Irish Times sports writer Gavin Cummiskey. Máire-Treasa, Michael and Gavin, great to see you again.
Hi John, how are you?
How are you?
Hope we're all good, and I think we'll probably start, folks, with the women's rugby dressing room controversy. So the RFU continuing their investigation into what they described as an appalling situation whereby Connacht and Ulster women players had to change beside bins. In a derelict area outside Energeria Park last weekend, the players should have been allowed to use the dressing rooms. So the government needs to fix that, obviously, to give them whatever status they require if ladies football and camogie players can use the dressing rooms at Croke Park. It appears from reports, and O'Keefe Trace was writing about it during the week, that the Connacht were directed to an incorrect area before the Leinster match operations personnel arrived at the ground, and Ulster then followed suit. Niamh Briggs was at Energeria Park and she said everything was fine when it came to Munster's situation. So I feel, my just take before I open the floor to you folks, is that the effort is the same, whether they're amateur or whether they're pro, it doesn't matter. To say somebody's an amateur strikes me as a bit of a cop-out. I think it's been the year of woman when it comes to sport. Rachel Blackmore rides 6 winners at Cheltenham. She wins the Aintree Grand National. Kelly Harrington wins Olympic gold. Ellen Keane wins Paralympic gold. Katie George-Dunleavy and Eve McChrystal win Paralympic gold. Leona Maguire is the top point scorer as a rookie at the Solheim Cup. The Meath ladies footballers win the senior after winning the intermediate only 9 months previously. So achievements where you just forget about gender, as it should be, because they're fantastic achievements, all realised when the appropriate conditions are in place. So, Máire-Treasa, is this just a case of they made a mess of it, they've apologised, it won't happen again, as they called it, the RFU, appalling, or is it a case when it comes to gender and levelling the playing field that it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back in your view?
I wish I was surprised by this news. I really wasn't when I saw it. It was a sigh of dismay and disbelief that this had happened, and even worse, I think that the women playing on that team just kind of, and I'm not blaming them in any way, shape or form, they were herded into that area. They saw what it looked like. They could see vermin and they just said, okay, this is our lot. We're going to take it and go, because this is what women are used to. We're just used to, and I use the phrase we because this is outside of sport as well. You take what you're given, because a lot of the time if you complain vocally about something, you're slapped down and people don't want to hear it. Now, you're absolutely right that the last year has shown what women can achieve, and actually what any human being can achieve if you give them the right backing and the right circumstances and the setup and that kind of thing. But the IRFU's apology, to me, will ring very, very hollow unless they actually start investing in the women's game properly. For too long, and they might not agree with this, but the perception is that it is a pain. It is a boil they wish they could lance off and get rid of, while women are pulling money away from the real rugby. And the only way it will change is, there's 2 ways this will change. One, I think, is that their male counterparts need to stand up. And I know it's very difficult on players who are relying on the IRFU or on sponsors for their wages. But until men start speaking up on behalf of women, and actually on behalf of every kind of minority and anywhere where anyone's kind of being, I hate using the word oppressed, because, oppression is real in some cases, and this is just, at the end of the day, women playing rugby. But until men speak up and help lift up the people who need that help, things won't change. And 2, sponsors need to grow. Sponsors need to be lifting the phone and say, what are you doing here? We're giving you a lot of money. It doesn't look good for us, because you know what, women are over 50% of the population. We're buying the products these sponsors have emblazoned on jerseys. So if the IRFU apologise, that's a great first step. But unless we see actual, tangible change that we can measure and say, you know what, that was a watershed moment and look what has changed, great, I'm all for it then. But I'm going to hold my breath.
Yeah, Niamh Briggs has written about this in the Irish Independent today. She said the change of facilities for Munster versus Leinster were perfect. She says the international camp won for nothing. She says it's about grassroots coaches and getting them into the game. Paul Ball spoke about it this week. Gary Ringrose spoke about it this week. Johnny Sexton spoke about it this week. Gavin Cummiskey, are you in line with what Máire-Treasa is saying here?
Yeah, Máire hit the nail on the head about the male players. Seamus Coleman was able to get his act together and support Katie McCabe's squad to make sure they got equal pay, actually take a pay cut to play for their country, because he doesn't see male or females, he just sees Irish internationals. The male rugby players that you mentioned there, none of them kind of went on their social media or asked to be interviewed. The question was put to them. And if you listen back, the quotes are very similar from 3 different professional male Irish rugby players in 3 different interviews. Thought that was very funny, What happens is this will happen again, by the way. It won't be for about 18 months, and it won't be a tent. It won't be rats in people.
Why will it happen again?
Because I've been covering women's rugby in Ireland since 2012, and it happens every 18 months. What happens is the communications department of the IRFU, run by Stephen McNamara, very good ship, knows what he's doing, excellent at crisis management. That's where they brought him from Ryanair several years ago. So what happens is they do this. There's no concern, there's no care of duty, there's no pathway for these players at the moment. If you really dig a little bit beneath the surface, if the male players actually looked at this, like Johnny Sexton was on your radio station this week saying he doesn't know. He's the captain of the Ireland men's team and he doesn't know anything about what's going on beneath the surface. I guarantee it'll happen again. And it happens again is because nobody's putting real care and there's no real depth or real long-term plan into developing Irish women's rugby in Ireland. So when something does happen again, be it an overnight train or be it they'll miss flights or the showers won't work in Donnybrook or they'll be changing with rats in their bags. When this happens again, I promise you, it'll happen in about a year, 18 months. What'll happen is the IRFU communications department will kick into gear. They'll apologise. They'll put forward people like Johnny Sexton who'll go, look, this will never happen again, I promise you, And everyone will go, and then the best thing to do is they'll silence everyone by going, we're going to do a deep investigation now. And the only reason there's an investigation is because the Connacht women came out and spoke. And it was because the media are onto it, because Mary Hannigan and Niamh Briggs are writing pieces about it. That investigation just gives them time to quieten it down. But
maybe there's no hiding place now. We saw what the FEI did to train.
There is. I'll tell you where the hiding place is, right? They'll do an investigation, okay? And the results of the investigation will come out just when the men's rugby season is really kicking into gear. Just when Leinster and Munster and Connacht and Ulster are going into Europe. And nobody will care at that point in time. And it'll be swept under the carpet. Now, they're on the verge of not qualifying for a World Cup after coming fourth in a World Cup in 2014, So I've watched it. I've covered it season on season since then. And I've watched the whole thing disintegrate. And I've watched them try sevens a pathway. And I have to say, I thought Johnny Sexton really let himself down on radio this week. He talked about how I want my daughter to have the same opportunities that I had. That's just never going to happen. Right now, there's no daughters. There's no.
How do you know it's not going to happen?
Because that's the world we live in.
I'm watching it all the time. For starters, right?
But you had.
I can't become a professional rugby player if I'm a woman.
But you had women's soccer players changing tracksuits and toilets. They've improved the situation over the last few years. They learned from their mistakes under, obviously, a new broom, a new regime. Michael, has not the situation not improved with the women's GPA joining the men's GPA? Okay, well, where's Rugby Players Ireland this week? Who are supposed to be looking after, if they're supposed to be looking after male and females? I haven't heard anything from them. I haven't seen a word from them. Sexton had no knowledge when he talked about this, and he went into great detail about it. He went into no detail. He just said, "Oh, look, the IRFU have apologised, and this can never happen again. It's terrible, But with absolutely no idea that why is there just so many questions. All you have to do is scratch the surface, and you've got millions of stories. Did they get any expenses or mileage, these players, when they're playing into provincials? Why did Vodafone sponsor a tournament that has no Ireland internationals? Why did it happen just before World Cup qualifiers? I know on the club scene, I know coaches, players, everyone objected to this, going, why are we having this Interpro and putting it on TG Car with the sponsorship coming in, and then we don't have it when the internationals are in camp, okay? And also, what we saw against in the Spanish match, these Ireland internationals are in desperate need of games. They don't know how to catch and pass under pressure. It's so evident, and it looks like they should be disgraceful. But why didn't they a month beforehand have a
a big inter-pro season that was live on TV, and when they're put under the pressure that Spain were going to put them on.
Maybe they don't have the pool of players.
Because nobody cares, and because there is no structure.
They will say they care, Gavin. They will say they care, and they're not here to defend themselves on that point. Michael Verney, have you seen an improvement?
Do you know how you know you care? You know you care by what's the proof in the pudding, and like we keep seeing it over and over again every year that there's evidence of when you see tents like that set up for an inter-pro game, you know they don't care. You know that
they said they're appalled, and I think you have to also, when they've had their investigation, maybe there was a legitimate mistake made.
They said they were appalled when the Independents started asking them questions 3 days after the event. Yeah. They're just giving, look, it's the communications department of the RFU are very good. They're good people in there. They're good at their jobs. But it's not their job to fix women's rugby. It's their job to dampen out the fire when it comes. I guarantee you we'll be having this conversation in 12 months, 18 months.
Michael, you from a GA perspective, we had the situation last year with the ladies football team from Galway actually had to go to Croke Park and they'd barely any time to prepare for a semi-final. Have you seen, say, in the last 12 months in GA with women and ladies football and camogie improvements in terms of a level playing field?
Yeah, I was in Croke Park that day, actually. I was on my way to Parnell Park when I got word that it had been changed to Croke Park, and I think Galway were en route at the time. And the game was brought forward, I think, I think the game was brought forward because there was a game in Croke Park that day. So it was last-ditch effort to make sure that they played in Croke Park. It was disastrous for both teams involved. The optics of, we'll say, the WGPA and the GPA joining together and there been an equal gender balance under executive is very commendable, and that's a great step. But like I've definitely seen, in the LGFA and in the Camogie Association, the same failings of, for example, Aisling Thompson played the All-Ireland Camogie final for Cork last Sunday, gave her life to play that game, and then Milford were playing a Cork Camogie Championship game on the Wednesday night in Cork somehow. I don't know how that happens. There was, a big controversy in Tip last year when several players, I think they had to give a bye. I think there was a Camogie and a ladies football club basically just crossover within 24 hours, and one of the teams had to give a walkover. That happens in the majority of counties, particularly in the LGFA and the Camogie Association. And people will blame the GAA, naturally enough, but obviously they're not under that umbrella. And while there is great work being done there, they're still miles behind. And I'm not saying the GAA is a perfect organisation, it's far from that, but the LGFA and the Camogie Association are still well behind their male counterparts in that respect. So they still have a long way to come. Like with the Galway situation that happened last year, could that potentially happen again? Yes, definitely. The same as Gavin, it's probably more than likely it's going to happen again. There are steps being put in place to make sure that these things, they're less likely to happen. But there's also a lot of things happening behind the scenes, particularly at club level, that is just not good enough, and that would definitely not suggest that there's parity between men and women.
And to add to what Michael said there as well, can I just say one thing? Actually, Michael's absolutely right. And the All-Ireland Camogie finals were on last Sunday. Galway and Cork were in the senior finals, and both Cork and Galway county boards decided they were going to play their club hurling championship for the men's. So there are a lot of women who would have had a lot of support, like missing brothers, cousins, neighbours, this, that and the other, who couldn't go to Croke Park to watch women who have toiled away to win an All-Ireland title for their county. Galway won out last Sunday. It was a great day out, but there was a lot of people left at home in Galway who couldn't physically get to Croke Park for one reason or another, and it happened to the Cork fans as well, and that's not good enough. So, while the LGFA and the Camogie Association, Michael is right, they have a long way to come to catch up to the GAA, and that's not their fault. They're newer organisations, they have fewer bodies. But at the same time, the GAA don't cover themselves in glory either when it comes to it. There's a lot of noise being made about the GAA, where we all belong. And I know Larry McCarthy in particular and previous GAA presidents wanted to bring LGFA and Camogie Association. That's another conversation. But, we might all belong there, but we all belong to it at different levels. I've seen this personally, involved in sport, playing for clubs, and also involved in backroom teams. And I see it as well from a media point of view. Women, we don't belong as much as men, and that's the long and short of it. It's getting better, but none of this is a surprise. And Gavin actually is rare. He's one of the few men who actually regularly covers women's sport and knows it inside out. And that's an issue as well in media. There's not enough, women involved in it. So I can tell you there's been a few stories involving women over the years where I have tried to get it covered, on media, and you'd be pushing and pushing and pushing and banging on a door. If the same story was happening in a male equivalent sport, it'd be all over the back pages of the sport.
If I told you some of the stories that haven't been able to publish over the years, I can't because we get sued, but it's there's so many people who don't want to go on the record and who don't want to be sources because it's too much stress, you know. These are males who are managing teams, and these are current female players. They'd love for it to get out there just what really is happening in Irish rugby and how little they've been helped along the way. But the problem is, and this is how the IRFU get away with it, and this is how Cork GAA get away with it, they're trying to prepare for a game at the moment where they're supposed to be talking about the wrongs that have been done against them, you know. So they have to make a choice. Either you prepare for the match in the circumstances that you're given, with the cards that you're dealt, or you don't prepare for a match and you speak out and you you ruin any chance of you getting picked again. Like, this is still happening, you know. I've not seen improvements. I've seen it go downhill. Like, let's just take Lynn Cantwell. How the hell did the IRFU let her slip through their hands? She, like, one of the greatest players to ever play for the game, just a natural communicator, someone that Sport Ireland all over. And then South Africa just came in and went, this is such an easy win for us. We'll make her the director of women's rugby. Like, and the thing is, she is just a made administrator that you could have molded and shaped into something that could be and not even near. You don't even have to put her near the men's game. But yeah, when that happened, it was just another low. Like, you've covered the 2017 World Cup in UCD and up in Belfast, and that was an unmitigated disaster. It was an unmitigated disaster because the preparation wasn't done. They didn't have a long-term strategy, and they still don't. And I remember thinking at that World Cup, I was there going, oh God, okay, they're going to have to qualify for the next World Cup now. You look around and you look at the will, and you looked at they had a review, but you know, when you talk to people on the ground who, again, don't need the hassle in their life of going on the record, that's the thing. People just are so beaten down by the way they've been treated.
But it's not much harder when you're looking at England and France as professionals. It's an amateur sport here.
But we flagged this back in 2014. If you don't take this seriously, if you don't look at some level of the gas thing is there's no player pathway, you know. Like, look at these international players and find out how many club matches they played in the last 2 years. I'd say like 2, 3, maybe none. You know, none of them played the Interpro series.
But is there seriously the pool of players?
There's no joined up thinking here. There really
is there seriously the pool of players?
What they do is they put up Adam Griggs and Tom Tierney, the Ireland coaches, who have no power and no control over how this whole thing works. They're just junior coaches who are employed by the IRFU. And these lads get put in the firing line, and you ask them basic questions like, okay, so who do you answer to? How does the structure? I did this with Adam Griggs there a while ago, and he's the guy getting thrown under a bus. He's just a career coach, you know. And I asked him, okay, so who do you answer to, and how does the system work, and was it? And just didn't know. He just did not know. And then a day later, they're like, oh, of course I know. He did a new press conference and he named all the people who were in charge. But you know, you can make fun of them over and over again, but all that they know it well now. You just weather the storm. The men's rugby will come back in. Nobody will.
Well, what we'll do is we'll extend the invitation to the RFU. We'll weather the storm. We'll give it a time. We'll extend the invitation then to the RFU to have their say and give their point of view across on this.
I'm going to do this problem with the FAI because Seamus Coleman came out and went.
But is it also it could also be the fact that there's a new regime in the FAI and there might be a bit of different.
And Jonathan
thinking.
Hill saw an easy win by getting Seamus Coleman and Katie McCabe down at the table and going, okay, I'm going to take 1,000 off your match fee and give 1,000 to their match fee, and then everyone looks good. They got a Sky deal. Like, they see the writing on the wall that women's sport, if you don't get behind it financially, even though it makes no money, it'll never turn a profit. Like, but you have to put long-term investment in it. So yeah, Jonathan Hill.
Well, you have to because it's the right thing to do.
Win for him. It's not that big a deal. But
I'm sure his motives are good. You know, you can't say we don't know his motives are not good. His motives are surely good.
He's in to make the FAI a respectable organisation again. Straight away, you go after pay equality. Of course, it makes loads of sense. Loads of other countries have already done it. They took a year to do it. You know, you don't get a pat on the back for paying people the same amount of money for doing the same job.
Okay. I just want to move on to we've got to take a break here for the news. So Gavin, Cummiskey, Michael Verney and Máire-Treasa, Nic-Cheallaigh, so much to talk about between 2 and 3 on the Saturday panel here, the Ryder Cup, the managerial merry-go-round in Kerry, Kilkenny and Galway, and also sports documentaries with the Michael Schumacher documentary out this week on Netflix. 53106 if you want to get involved in the conversation. We're back after the news. Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us 53106, tweet us at Off the Ball. We're back with the Saturday panel reviewing the sporting week just gone with the broadcaster sportster and accredited sports psychologist Máire-Treasa, Nic-Cheallaigh, Irish Independent sports writer Michael Verney, and the Irish Times sports writer Gavin Cummiskey. Listen on News Talk. Watch us on the Off the Ball digital and social channels for Periscope on Twitter at Off the Ball, YouTube, on Facebook. We're also streaming on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports in your app store to download it. You can text us on 53106. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. Just getting some of your texts. Lads, in fairness, with regard to female sport in the country, the Camogie Association will not communicate with the Football Association. If the governing bodies of female sport won't communicate, well, they're separate organisations. What chance have the participants got in being the best they can be? It's extremely disappointing, says Kieran. Gavin Cummiskey, spot on in terms of professional rugby players' response this week, says Michael in Dublin. Wanting the same opportunities for his daughter, I presume this is referring to Johnny Sexton, may not be referring to just rugby, but to reach the top in whatever she chooses, says Pat. Why is the radio interviewer defending the RFU so much? They've few women players because the RFU haven't funded the programme. Simple, don't be a spineless shill for the RFU. Well, the only reason I'm not defending them, I'm just saying that they're not here to give their point of view. And hi JD, please discuss how good the mighty Wallabies are looking right now after smashing the Springboks this morning and beating the Boks last Saturday as well. Rugby Australia has been in a really bad place the last few years. It's great to see the Wallabies comprehensively beating the current world champions, says Aussie Tony in Kilkenny. Just on managerial GAA merry-go-round, folks, Michael Verney, Brian Cody in for 24th year in Kilkenny. I hope they win the All-Ireland. I'd love to see Cody go out at the top. He is the Alex Ferguson, I would call, of GA management. But it'll be 7 years next year since their last All-Ireland. Any thoughts whether he should step aside or give someone else a go, or is he right to keep going? Or really is the county board's call, I suppose, Michael? We just actually don't have Michael Verney there at the moment. Máire-Treasa, if you want to come in this, Brian Cody, the man who told you the right way to say hurl or hurley, what do you think about him staying on?
Well, I mean, anybody who knows that it's actually a hurl and not a hurley in my book is a good guy. But no, all jokes aside, it's obviously unusual, isn't it? These things don't happen anymore in most management in most types of games around the world. So Brian Cody is an outlier. And it's funny, it's only been a few years and it's a famine for Kilkenny people. And I knew we were discussing this today, so I canvassed the opinions of a few different people I know in Kilkenny, people who've been into their hurling and would also know that it was indeed a hurl. There was two schools of thought. One was that, the conveyor belt of talent isn't coming through, and therefore Brian Cody is getting the best out of what is there. And then there's another school of thought that says there is plenty of talent coming through, but at the moment Brian Cody is the only person either capable or willing to put his hand up to do the management. Now, I don't know. I'm not of Kilkenny. I'm not embedded in Kilkenny. I wouldn't know the ins and outs of club hurling down there and who's coming through St. Kieran's College and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I can't tell which side of those two schools of thought, impartiality comes down on. But they were the two broad sweeps that I was getting. But there's also a massive respect for the man. He's achieved a lot. And he's still doing it, at a time where I don't think anybody would blame him if he said, you know what, I've done enough now. I've given enough of my time. It's probably a bit easier now in one sense. He's retired. He was a primary teacher once upon a time. He retired a few years ago. That probably, I'd imagine, maybe makes the gig a bit easier. But on the other hand, he's dealing with players today who are different to the players even 20, even 10, maybe even 5 years ago. People have evolved and psychology has evolved and the psychology of young men is evolving and changing. And that's a challenge as well. And the fact that he's putting his hand up to keep doing it is admirable, though I think maybe, and again, this is me speaking off a personal basis, if I had a personal relationship with somebody like Brian Cody, there's a part of me who might be thinking, you know what, you don't owe anyone anything. It'd be great if you got out on a high, but leaving now, you would also be on a high. You've achieved so much. Spend some time with your family and friends and other things. But then again, he is hurling, isn't he? Maybe this is what he's doing, what he's loving. It's unusual. I think more power to him. There's plenty of people who wouldn't be able for it. And this is Brian Cody. Don't forget they were an All-Ireland final 2019, and there's talk like, Jesus, they've given him another one. It's a bit mad when you look at it that way,
Michael Verney, are you coming down on any side on this? Brian Cody, is he equipped to manage Kilkenny into 2022 against the style of hurling that Limerick are playing, for example, at the moment?
Well, the question I would ask is, and I definitely aim this at Kilkenny folk, are Kilkenny underachieving with the talent that they have available to them? I would definitely say they're not underachieving. I think if anything, potentially he could be overachieving. If you were to pick, the top 15, Colin Keys even did it in our paper this morning. He did the top 40 hurlers in the country. 3 Kilkenny players in it. That's obviously based on this year. But if you were to pick, the top 15 or 20 based on over the last 5 or 10 years, you're looking at probably Owen Murphy, TJ Reid, maybe Pádraig Walsh. Like, the talent he has available to him, the conveyor belts of minor All-Ireland winners and under-21 All-Ireland winners that he had, you know, in the noughties. Like, every team was producing a Richie Power, a Richie Hogan, a TJ Reid. They were just ready-made senior players over the next couple of years. That's just not the case now. Their under-20s have been beaten well by Galway the last couple of years. Their minors are competitive, but they're not producing, I would say in particular in forwards, they're not producing those elite forwards that maybe they were before. So I think it's a difficult one. Kilkenny people, I don't know if they think somebody that Henry or Eddie Brennan or DJ or whoever could come in and do a better job. But I think the general consensus from people I'm talking to is they just want to see somebody else do it another way. That's what, from, you know, anecdotally, what a lot of people are saying to me. Brian's record is phenomenal. It's 11 All-Ireland, 17 Leinsters, 8 or 9 league titles. Obviously, they haven't won All-Ireland since 2015. Even winning that 2015 All-Ireland with a skeleton squad compared to what he would have had was probably one of his best achievements. They won the league in 2018. They've won Leinster the last 2 years, albeit a weaker Leinster championship. Something Máire-Treasa said there, I would pick up on. I've talked to Kilkenny people before, and they kind of what they say is that they don't think Brian Cody exists outside of the sideline. You don't see him in Kilkenny. You don't see him going for petrol. You don't see him around about. You'd wonder, like, who are his mentors, or who is he canvassing opinions of, or is it just, would say, his wife Elsie would obviously be been a big camogie player in her days.
Well, he's got a backroom team.
It's a backroom team, but I'm wondering more along the lines of, you know, has he asked the question, or does it go through his head? Is there a possibility that I could wear out my welcome here? Is there a possibility that it could end like maybe it did for Mickey Hart, who obviously Tyrone had never achieved anything until he came in. He brings 3 All-Irelands, and then it probably, be fair to say, it didn't end the way he would have liked it to end. But as regards, is Brian maximising what he has available to him? I have to say, I think he is, and even tactically, I think they have adapted. They're probably still a small bit behind, but a lot of that is to do with the players that you have at your disposal. And it just, like, he doesn't have the players at his disposal maybe to take down a Limerick at the moment. But ironically, who's the last manager to beat Limerick in a meaningful championship match? Brian Cody in 2019 semi-final, when nobody gave them any chance. So Kilkenny people would want to be careful what they wish for as well. Change is great if you know what way the change is going to go. You know the people coming in, they're going to deliver and have a really good squad available to them. But change for the sake of change is not necessarily a good thing.
Does Shetland want it, would you say? Like, now, would it be a smart move by him to jump in now, or Eddie Brennan or DJ?
Well, it's an interesting one, Gav. No more than with Mickey Hart in Tyrone. When he was manager, nobody is going to stand up and say, I want the job. It's just probably a respect thing. That just was the same case in Tyrone. You wouldn't have heard Peter Canavan or Brian Dewar or Fergal Logan saying, I want the job. And then, 2 weeks after Mickey stepped down, Fergal Logan and Brian Dewar were put in place. They were the next men up. But Henry's with Thomastown this year, neighbouring club of his own. He tried to win an intermediate with them. They've been beaten in finals recently. He's obviously won with Ballyhale, 2 All-Ireland clubs. He hardly lost the championship match with them, I think. Eddie's obviously been with Laois and brought Laois up to a good level. He's with Coola this year. DJ's got experience with Carlow IT, got them to a couple of Fitzgibbon Cup finals. So there's definitely, more so than 3 or 4 years ago, there's definitely replacements there. I don't think there would have been a couple of years ago. They just wouldn't have served the apprenticeships that they would have needed to. Whereas even Michael Fennelly in Offaly now, David Herity in Kildare, there will be a good pool to pick from whenever Brian does step aside.
Maybe what you're saying there, Michael, is right. Maybe people in Kilkenny want to see just somebody different, just to see how it goes. At some stage, I think it might get to that stage. But until the county board make a change, or there's a challenge like Eamon Barry against Sean Boylan and Meath, Brian wants the job, and he's got the job for another year. In Kerry, there was a statement that came out this week from the county board which read, the process of appointing the next Kerry senior football managers commenced. The Kerry GA Management Committee has appointed the following five of a subcommittee to revert with a recommendation at the earliest opportunity. No further comments will be made until the process has concluded. Jerry O'Sullivan from Radio Kerry was on with Jerry Gilroy yesterday. He said that it was believed Peter Keane knew about that statement before it was released. I didn't like the statement. Whether Peter Keane goes again or not even if he's going for a fourth year, they should have mentioned him in his management team. Maybe they're waiting until the process is complete, but I think they should have mentioned it now. Various options being speculated upon: Jack O'Connor, a dream ticket of Seamus Moynihan and Donny Buckley, Peter Keane again, Gavin. I think there's a lot of anguish down in Kerry. There's only one thing that's required, and that's win the All-Ireland, and they haven't been doing that.
Yeah, so does Jack stepping down from Kildare, that's what he did the last time, wasn't it, for the third coming? Or is that the writing on the wall, or is it already discussed? I don't know. But I don't know what the feeling is in Kerry, but Peter Keane, Tomás O'Shea just eviscerated them on the Sunday game after that, didn't he? Saying that he hasn't taken the success he's had at underage into the senior ranks, and they're really stung by this failure this time around. So I don't know, maybe it is time for change there, but is the third coming of Jack something that they want to embrace? I don't know.
Well, they've got a county board chairman as well to come in before the end of the year. So there's lots of complicating political factors at play. Máire-Treasa, it's only about one thing: winning All-Irelands. You see Dublin win 6 in a row. You see Tyrone, of all teams, go and win the All-Ireland this year. There's only one requirement, and they get anxious if they don't win it. Yeah, they do. And I think, is that more Peter Keane's fault, or is it more the fault of the structures that they have coming up? And you can say, yeah, he did really well at minor, but that's boys against men, And have we had enough time to allow those boys who came through under minor to become developed the type of footballers that they need to be to win? Because unfortunately for Kerry, football has evolved. It's become much more, driven by science, stats, players that have become bigger, stronger. It's not just about having tradition anymore, which carried Kerry for a long, long time. And it's not just about being beautiful, natural footballers. That day, unfortunately, is gone. And Kerry woke up to that for sure, but I think there might be a year or two off that yet. So you could argue then they have a beautiful centre of excellence down in Kerry, and you can really see the work they're doing, because they've realised later than the other counties, the Dublins and the Tyrones, we need a bit more smarts behind the beauty as well, And the epitome of the Rose of Tralee, you can't just be pretty, you got to have intelligence going on as well, But for me, it seems that they're a few years off that from what I've seen on evidence, but that's not to criticise anyone, but it's certainly not to criticise Peter Keane. So you could argue, was he getting the best out of those players? Some say yes, some say no. He got pulled over the coals last year for that shock loss against Cork. I remember he got a really bad abuse for playing Bruno Beglich. He'd be more of a defensive guy, and they were playing him up in the forwards. Kind of, they played very defensively, and they got caught and they lost anyway. And then maybe I'm thinking in hindsight, when we look at that, was that because maybe Peter knew the limitations of the team he had? I don't know. This is speculation, because of course out of all of this, we're talking in a vacuum. We don't know what goes on in between the walls, those sacred walls of a team. But it's an interesting situation that Kerry find themselves in. And like you said, there's a lot of politics going on now. There's a lot of people of the opinion that should this be left until, the new chair is appointed and brought in, and let it be seen under that person. But of course, then the other school of thought would be like, well, other counties are already thinking of 2022, because the big thing that Tyrone has managed to achieve, aside from winning the title for themselves, has given every other county who were, written off or said they haven't a hope of beating Dublin, haven't a hope of beating Kerry. All of a sudden, there's a lot of counties now thinking we could be next year's sleeping giant. They're already planning, so Kerry mightn't want to wait. Natives are always restless in Kerry, Michael, if they're not bringing that Sam Maguire Cup home.
Yeah, realistically, that's the case, John. And it's funny, things could have been so different for Peter Keane. Like, they were in control of that drawn game with 15 against 14 against Dublin, and could have changed the course of history and could have denied a 5 in a row. And don't think they got a shot away for the last 12 minutes of that game. And Dublin just wrestled back control, and it was Kerry nearly that were holding on at the end rather than vice versa. But I would be similar to you. I wouldn't have liked the statement that was put out from Keane's perspective anyway. To me, it looked like a vote of no confidence more than anything else. I don't know how many times, I can't think offhand, and maybe I stand to be corrected. I don't know how many times an outgoing manager has had to re-interview against other potential candidates for the job and ended up getting or holding on to the job. I can't think offhand of that.
It's shoddy form in a way. It's a bit shoddy for me.
It is a bit, yeah. And like, listen, the Kerry County Board will probably point back to that this is being a transparent process at the end of his 3-year term. But to me, and I think to a lot of people, it just looks like a mechanism to change Kerry manager. And Jack on the Examiner pod the day after Kerry were beaten, or 2 days after Kerry beaten, I don't know, maybe it wasn't a come get me plea, but he definitely put it out there that how attractive the job was And obviously, if you were a Kildare player or someone involved in the Kildare County Board, I don't think he would have been too happy. And then all of a sudden, it all manifests in a couple of days later that he's gone, despite the fact that he was in, there's pretty good amount of planning done for Kildare for 2022 with coaching staff and everything was nearly over the line, and suddenly it's all changed again. But that seems to me the most likely outcome of this. Jack O'Connor being Kerry manager in 2022, and the third coming. I don't remember too many third comings, to be honest with you. They say you shouldn't go
Cyril
back
Farrell,
once.
maybe?
Cyril Farrell, yeah, in fairness, yeah.
Trilogy.
Yeah. Those guys were there a couple of times too, and all kind of got success, or at least got teams back to finals as well. But it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. But I can see nothing only change. That's the only thing I can see.
Well, Donny Buckley, go on, Gavin.
There was a very typically thought-provoking piece by Jim McGuinness in the Irish Times today. I'm not going into the weeds of structures here, by the way, but
don't.
He talks about how to change it the way the plans are potentially to change the championship is such a disservice to Ulster football, who've got it right and being consistent. Like Ulster football, that championship effectively broke Kerry this year, because Kerry weren't able to cope with the intensity of a team that had come through 4 absolute nail-biter matches up in the province. So Ulster are doing everything right that you should do if you're a provincial structure, to produce a team that can win in All-Ireland. Tyrone went and proved it. And I wonder if Kerry are going to keep bashing against this wall, even if Jack O'Connor comes in, unless the structures are completely revamped and they take away the advantage that Ulster have earned by going through the traditional routes. So I don't know, it feels like a bit of a poison chalice in Kerry now, doesn't it? Because it's been so long and it weighs so heavy on them, this whole, they have to carry it through the winter. They don't want to talk about football in the winter now. If you go down there, you notice, because it's like that semi there, that broke them, for such a massive county. That really, they didn't see that coming at all. They've been beaten by the Dubs and Mayo over the years, but Tyrone catching them like that, repeating history, is as grim as it gets, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a painful time. 53106. I think the risks for Kilkenny changing managers minimal, a bit like Kerry in football or Mayo. Kilkenny will still be Leinster champions or close to it, etc. There is minimal downside, but the upside is to compete for the All-Ireland, says one of our texters. And another one, lads, Cody is closer to Wenger than Fergie, brought them to the absolute peak of the sport before falling away at the end. Change would likely mean regression rather than progression. Mia Hall-Donoghue, is he going back to Galway, Máire-Treasa?
No idea.
Come on, give us an exclusive.
I genuinely have no idea. I've been looking for white smoke and all that kind of stuff, but no, I haven't heard a thing. All I've heard is that there was a load of names thrown into the pot the first day, and one by one they were being picked off. For a lot of people would say he's the rational choice. Don't forget, we still don't really know why he left 2 years ago. We don't really know. And I actually
was it not reported that maybe relations with reported but the relations with the county board.
We don't know for sure. And that's the thing why I'm always a bit careful whenever we see about these managerial merry-go-rounds in county boards. We never really know until somebody usually publishes a book or there's a review.
There's nothing in those books, Máire-Treasa. Nothing in those books.
Sometimes there can be. But I don't know. It'd be interesting. I know there's a lot of kind of, at the moment, you see, the Club Hurling Championship in Galway takes up so much bandwidth. So I know while people are interested to see who the Galway County manager is going to be, at the moment, a lot of the hurling people are so focused on Championship that while there's talk about it, it's not seen as a massive urgency yet. But I actually saw today in the Independent, there was an interesting article, I think it was Cyril Farrell actually saying that Micheál should be brought back in and he should try and convince Joe Canning out of retirement. So, I mean, you talk about strange going on in Kerry, could get even stranger in Galway.
Michael Verney.
It's a lengthy process, John, to go through there as well. Like the next manager, candidates have to be nominated by clubs, and then they go to the county board, and then the guys or whoever is nominated are interviewed. Like, that's quite a lengthy process. When Micheál Donoghue got the job in the first place, after Anthony Cunningham stepped aside, that was quite a lengthy process for him to get in place. I think it was only a couple of days before Christmas in 2015 when he was in place. So if they go through the processes that they have traditionally gone through, there won't be any solution over the next couple of weeks. So you're probably looking at late October, early November by the time they'd actually have a manager in place.
Very good. And if we're talking about books and sport, maybe Porter Carrington will bring one out after this Ryder Cup next week in Wisconsin against the United States. He's the captain. Shane Larry's in the team. Rory McIlroy's in the team. I can't wait for it, folks. Silly costumes, all the nonsense ceremonies around it. A team sport, which you don't get in golf. You've got fans there, American fans, be hostile enough. We hadn't had stadiums at all filled for the whole of the pandemic, and I think people sometimes forget that. Well, are you really looking forward to it, Gavin? Are you a Ryder Cup aficionado, or are you somebody who tries to avoid it?
No, well, it's unavoidable. So yeah, like you will get dragged into it, and it's because of I'm into it this year because of Padraig Harrington and obviously Shane Lowry. That would be it for me. No, I don't like. I'm not going to be wearing have my European flag draped over me or anything like that. The Irish Times have given it a real good go today. I'd point everyone towards Colin Burns, Colin, the caddies, Colin. He made a really interesting point about how all these players, especially the Americans, I think Brooks Koepka said it, they basically abandon their tour routine when they come into the USA team because they don't have any of their entourage with them. They basically go from being a complete individual sport to being this team group thing. And the Europeans have gotten that right over the years, you know, they've nailed the ethic. So that's one thing he said that's, anyway, I point you towards Colin Byrne when he writes about that because he's been obviously inside the ropes for so long. And yeah, it'll be really interesting and well, it'll be great, but it's like, it's very hard to get emotionally involved in a European team.
This is the only time when we support Europe as people.
It's not really Europe though, because the Brits are still in it, so that would be the main issue there.
I suppose there's Europe and the European Union, and we don't want to get sidetracked by that conversation for the next hour and a half here on News Talk. Michael Verney, you're a proud man this week because you're from Offaly, and Shane Lowry, you'll be there as a rookie, so you'll be up early now. Well, actually you won't be because it's America, isn't it? It's Wisconsin 6 hours, but you must be buzzed about it.
Yeah, no, I spoke to Shane. I spoke to Shane the week of the under-20 final. And I just asked him, as you always do when you're interviewing about one thing, you try and get a few little bits on another thing. So I was just asking him about the golf and that. And he was obviously very disappointed to miss out in 2016. He didn't realistically have a chance in 2018. And he would have preferred, I'm sure, to be an automatic choice. But like I know all around Burr, all around Offaly here, everyone's absolutely buzzing to have, you know, somebody within such a close proximity. I shared a football field with under 10. I actually said it to him that we actually beat them in that final. That he didn't remember it, of course. I naturally would remember it. He's got on to much bigger and better things than I have since.
Is that your last medal, Michael?
No, it's definitely not my last medal, but I don't even know where it is now. But he had long forgotten that game.
Similar career paths.
Yeah. I think it's gone two different directions, Gav, unfortunately. But no, it's great, and the buy-in around here is huge. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a more popular sports person. Everybody I know anyway seems to love Shane Lowry. Like, he was going to Croke Park that day, the under-20 match. He was taking pictures outside. He was like, some of the pictures after the game were just of him celebrating, and people were getting as much crack out of him celebrating as Offaly winning, and just how much it meant to him. So there's definitely a massive buy-in there. And even just from a character point of view, the likes of like Ian Poulter, like for the Ryder Cup, like someone like him just lights up the whole occasion. He's a crazy record. He 14 wins, I think, and six ties in his Ryder Cup record. He just seems to produce these amazing things every time the tournament comes around. And even Garcia as well, and Lowry, you'd have to say too, guys that would have been like Garcia and Poulter would have come from a soccer background. They would have been in team environments growing up. Lowry would have played a lot of GA. He would have been following his father when he was, he would have been following his father's career and would have been following GA. So these guys are kind of inherently associated with team sports. And I don't know if that's something that Europe just seemed to have a better handle of it as a result of that. The individualistic stuff seems to be put aside, and that they seem to be able to function really well as a team, whereas that's probably something that the Americans have struggled with in recent times. But it's definitely going to be interesting. It's going to be hostile as well. Like, remember like Justin Leonard's putt in 1999, and a 40-foot putt went in, and you think the competition is over and the whole green is swallowed up by Americans, and then I think it was Jose Maria Olazabal had to put out and after and ended up getting a half. But it's going to be really interesting. And like, for as regards sport, what do I see is really enjoyable sport a lot of the time is something with an atmosphere, something where people are invested and bought into it, and the Ryder Cup seems to always be like that. So yeah, I can't wait for it.
Máire-Treasa, will you have your European flag with the blue and gold draped around your shoulders next Friday? Somebody points out in our text machine, Victor Hovland is from Norway, which is also not in the EU.
No, I mean, I have no interest in supporting Team Europe. It means nothing to me. I have no emotional attachment to it whatsoever, but I have a massive emotional attachment to Padraig Harrington and Shane Lowry, just for those reasons that Michael's just after outlining. So yeah, I'll be glued to it for that, because it's a spectacle. I love watching the Americans bringing their brashness and all that the drama that brings into it. And then we see the way Pádraig Harrington prepares for everything. And the best thing about this, he really wanted this gig. So he has put every single minute that he's had to put toward this. He has focused on it. He has a plan, hopefully, that will come off, that hopefully that we're going to be all on tender hooks, on that last day, waiting to see, hopefully, all hoping that it'll be Shane Lowry at the end who'll do the magic and bring it home to Europe. But the whole European thing, no, I couldn't give a flying proverbial about that, but I do give a massive flying about the Irishmen involved. And I just think that it just goes to show that we love a spectacle and we love a bit of competition. We love a bit of controversy and a little bit of bad talking and that kind of stuff. But Team Europe, sorry, it hasn't been sold to me yet anyway.
Yeah, well, Team Harrington, Team Larry, Team McElroy will be enough, I think, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday next week. Hopefully there'll be another documentary about it. Máire-Treasa, we've got this new Michael Schumacher documentary that Shane Hannon's going to speak about in a few moments' time. I haven't seen it yet, deliberately haven't watched it, but sports documentaries, as we come out of lockdown and as we get back to some sort of normality, they were definitely a comfort at times. Have you seen Schumacher? And do you have any sports documentaries you might want to recommend to us?
No, I haven't seen it yet, actually. It's on my to-watch list, on my very long list of to-watch list. But look, you can't find anybody more Galway than me. And for me, if you haven't seen it yet, and be amazed, there was somebody in my life who hadn't seen it till I made him sit down and watch it last year when lockdown first hit, a year till Sunday. You can find it on YouTube. It is just magical. I remember getting it on videotape that Christmas from Santa after Galway won the All-Ireland. And it's just brilliant. And what makes a sports documentary, I don't care who's involved, I don't care if it's a team sport or individual, it's a bit of emotion, a bit of, people achieving something that people told you weren't going to achieve. It's seeing the unbelievable. It's that bit of magic. It's seeing the emotion, seeing people being built up to be knocked down, but they get up again and they go. And it's just brilliant. It stood the test of time. And actually, I was reminded as well of another one that's much more difficult to find. But actually, I don't know, maybe, John, you might have seen it actually, called Blow the Whistle. It was a documentary on referees during the 1999 championship. And it starred Pat McEnany. And you see him taking a cigarette break at halftime in one of the games. So they'd be the more local ones. But I suppose, what should be the big ones I like? I was trying to think through, and my heart kept going back to them. And I think that's it, isn't it? It's that emotional attachment, and that's why I go back to them. I thought the one about Senna was very good as well. I enjoyed that, but it's kind of one I'll only watch once and never watch it again. Whereas a year till Sunday, I'll watch it every year on a Sunday usually. What
year was that profile in the year till Sunday?
1998, when Galway won the All-Ireland in 1998, beating Kildare.
Under Mayo Man.
But actually, interesting fact is that I think some of the footage was actually shot over a few years previously. Pat Comer was in the Galway team at the time as one of their goalkeepers. He was a filmmaker as well, so he was recording as he went along. And I suppose that's why he had the implicit trust. He was already inside. So it wasn't unusual to have that camera in. It's just a pity in the culture we've seen now, like, for example, in the previous All-Ireland final where Mayo held their press day before we even knew who their opponent was going to be, because God forbid the media might, ruin things on us or ruin the camp. It just goes to show if you do it right, it's not going to damage anyone. No, but also you need the privacy. I think with their own players there last week, that was great to see. They were going bananas in the dressing room. You don't want journalists in for that either, I don't think. I remember I was in the Kilkenny dressing room when they won in 0-2. It was a strange experience when Andy Comerford stood up on the table and did the speech, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, I shouldn't be here, but I was. Gavin, sports documentaries, have you seen Schumacher yet?
Yeah, I actually watched it just as research for this morning. It starts quite well. I fast forwarded to the Senna bit because it's not a patch on the Senna doc, by the way, which from a couple of years ago, which is quality by.
Asif,
Yes, Asif, who did the Maradona one, obviously. So everything, and his one on Amy Winehouse is also excellent. But the Schumacher thing, my takeaway was it's really grim because he's not in it, because he can't be in it because of his brain injury in 2013 when he was skiing. After all those years of surviving on the racetrack, for that to happen on a skiing accident. But my takeaway is it's really grim. Sorry for people who want me to say nice things about it. Documentaries myself, I'd point you towards there's a great one called Lenny Cook. So you don't know who Lenny Cook is, I imagine. He was the best. He's the best 18-year-old basketballer in 2001. And then these two 16-year-olds called LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony came along and just blew him out of it, surpassed him. He kind of messed up his studies. He's basically the guy that you should know about, who should have been a superstar, who wasn't, because life kind of threw him a coup curveballs and he couldn't handle it. But it's brilliant watching him go toe to toe with LeBron when they're 16 and 17, and some of the footage is just is unbelievably good. And then obviously when we were kings, I'd watch that every day. And anything for surfers, I love Fergal Smith. Anything about Fergal Smith, there's 3 or 4 documentaries about him, the big wave surfer, who's now like a farmer on the land in West Clare. I'd point you towards him. It's all over YouTube.
Lenny Cook and Fergal Smith, I'll be definitely investigating those, listeners. You should as well.
Good afternoon's entertainment there.
I would put out the 2 Escobars, which was a 30 for 30, Andres Escobar and Pablo Escobar. The Hillsborough documentary was very harrowing and very tough watch, but amazingly orchestrated and executed by Daniel Gordon. The Impossible Job on Graham Taylor was good fun. The Maradona documentary is excellent. There's a 30 for 30 one done on Once Brothers, these 2 Yugoslav basketball players, Vlade Divac and Drazen Petrovic, both divided by war, and one of them then sadly passed away. So there's so much out there. The Senna one, I think, is because you really feel a connection with Senna. You really feel, whoa, I've got a real connection with him. And then we know what happened in that Grand Prix in 1994. Michael Verney, I don't know if there's any Offaly hurling ones that we haven't spoken about, but I don't really remember any Offaly hurling documentaries. Maybe they should have done one about the 90s team.
No, there's one there, all right. Duolini, The Great Escape, after the 94 All-Ireland final. You'll find it somewhere on YouTube. Well worth a watch if you're an Offaly fan. Marooned was a great one with Paddy O'Shea when they followed him in Westmeath, and he gave that, a grain of rice will tip the scales. I think that's a very good one too. I have to say, I don't know if, as a series that's kept going on year after year, if Laker Gale can be topped on TG Carr. I just think it's phenomenal, the job they do. The best thing they ever did, because we always said after the initial series, just make this show a little bit longer. Half an hour is not enough. And they did one with my own clubmate Johnny Pilkington earlier on this year. Just phenomenal, and you can always find them on the TG4 player. A couple other ones, I probably have an eclectic kind of mix of things. Being AP is brilliant, where they follow AP McCoy for about the year and a half before his retirement from the saddle, and it was a look inside the mind of a really selfish sports person who basically wants everything on his terms, and the kind of dialogue between him and his wife is fascinating. I'd be a big wrestling fan as well. There's a couple of brilliant wrestling documentaries. Beyond the Mat is a phenomenal look behind the scenes of what goes on in wrestling. It's just a mad industry. Wrestling with Shadows would be another one that follows Bret Hart in 1997, and it's all around the Montreal Screwjob, which everybody knows wrestling is technically not real. It's theatre, but this was one time where theatre kind of turned into reality, and it's one of the most infamous kind of incidents in wrestling history. And there's a couple of brilliant ones on Vice at the moment called Dark Side of the Ring, and there's a really good one around the wrestler Chris Benoit, who was involved in a murder-suicide many years ago, and it's just a fascinating insight behind the scenes. But they'd probably be my one. Senna as well is just like the best sporting documentaries will be like, I wouldn't necessarily watch Formula One the whole time. I definitely wouldn't, but they can just draw you in, and the footage in Senna is just outstanding. Yeah, but I'd be the same with the Schumacher one. I haven't watched it yet. I'm not very time sensitive. I'll probably watch it in 5 years' time or something like that. But there's lots out there. The Last Dance we haven't mentioned too, which I'm watching for the 3rd time at the moment, and just keep picking up new things every time I watch it. That basically got the vast majority of it through lockdown.
It did, didn't it?
Do you know which one we forgot as well, actually? Sunderland Till I Die as a series.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was excellent. And again, I had no emotional attachment to them as a team until I began watching it. And then you begin rooting for them, and you begin, feeling the highs and lows. And fortunately for them, there was a lot more lows than highs. But when it's done properly, like Michael said, you don't need to even know anything about the sport. You don't need to know anything about the protagonists. You just need a storyline to reel you in. And most athletes, it doesn't matter the sport, they have that because they tend to be exceptional people.
Yeah, and that's important as well with the Maradona one for anybody out there who's not really into football. This is an amazing documentary on a person's life. The footage is fantastic and really insightful, but also it really captures the suffocating nature of fame that a human being can experience. It really was just, I think, too much for Maradona to handle, as we found out. 53106, the 30 over 30 about the Red Sox winning the World Series is unreal, says one of our texters. Great discussion, people. Best sport documentaries, Heysel Requiem for a Cup final, Hillsborough, the one with Professor Phil Scraton, Diego Maradona and Senna, says Niall in Dublin. And finally, just to finish up, folks, can you ask Máire-Treasa from a sports psychologist point of view, is there something you can do to make a team start well? I coach underage teams, soccer, and some games they really seem to start slowly or sluggishly. They get into the second half then. Is it really hard to know? You see similar things with the Galway hurlers, says Sean in Galway.
Wow. I would say, Sean, give me a call. That's a complicated one, and if I had the answers to all those, and you wouldn't
be talking to us, you'd be earning
I'd be
billions
making
of
a
dollars.
lot more money. Yeah, I'd be earning
Exactly,
millions.
yeah.
But the one thing I will say to Sean is that if you notice that happening to one team and then you go and try apply what they did to fix it, it's not going to work. You have to individualise it, and you have to find out why, and then work from there. And I'm afraid that's the best answer I can give right now.
I was sure there was a Mayo question coming there. Could Máire-Treasa somehow lift the curse in Mayo or do something? So at least the question was a bit easier, even if it did hit home a bit.
Well, unfortunately, I think Mayo they're still grieving a bit, so nobody's been in touch from Mayo this afternoon. But that might change on Football Saturday between 3 and 5. Máire-Treasa, Nic-Cheallaigh, Gavin, Cummiskey, Michael Verney. Great to have you on. Great discussion. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Slán go fóill, lads.
Thanks. Take it easy.
Good luck.
Okay, off the ball on Saturday here on News Talk is what you're listening to, and Brentford have beaten Wolves by 2-0 in the Premier League. We're going to speak to Shane Hannon about that Michael Schumacher documentary after this break.
Off the ball.